this really exciting work, ladies and gentlemen. You learned that, I have to repeat it again, land degradation is a global issue. New work has shown that. And it costs us dearly if we don't act in preparing for resilience. These large numbers which you gave us, Ephraim, are troubling, but you have not yet figured in the risks of extreme events which may result from degrading land and soils, and those figures will be even higher when the food system gets out of whack. Detlef Virchow is our next speaker. He is senior researcher at the Center for Development Research in Bonn, and he manages an organization dealing with horticulture, Global Hort. Detlef, you have the floor. He will speak about horticulture production causing land degradation or enhancing resilience, ? Go ahead.
Thank you, Joachim. This is working.
I need to rush all of you from here on. We have a question-hungry audience. I see that.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. And ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I hope you hear me. And I hope you will not be disappointed, because I will take you away from land management issues. But I promise you, I will bring you back after all, after 10 minutes, 12 minutes, back to the issue how land management, 5 minutes, no, 10 minutes, can enhance resilience for individuals, but also communities. So you will see that horticulture is a part of the high value segment with blessings, but also a curse. And I will talk about that, and then I will conclude. When I talk about horticulture, I mean mainly fruits and vegetables, but of course horticulture includes all the others, herbs and spices, etc., etc. Horticulture belongs to the high-value crops, which are characterized by higher net return per unit of land compared to staples or other widely grown crops. They are highly responsive to constant and careful cultivation, handling, and monitoring, as well as typically perishable. But they are also able to be cultivated by small up to large-scale enterprises. So that is the bottom line. And high-value crops are on the rise, not only in the conference like this, where you more or less in all the sessions hear something about vegetables and fruits, but also in production and consumption worldwide, especially also in developing countries. It is because of this relative profitability that stimulates the crop diversification into horticulture. And it is also a kind of demand-driven process due to increased demand of a society which is getting richer and which is getting more urban, and so the whole food pattern changes and diet patterns. We don't have to conceptualize, but the major issue is here that land and soil is one of the crucial assets enhancing resilience for individuals, but also for communities. Horticulture can increase the value of land and the soil, and can enhance, therefore, the resilience of farmers and local economy. And this is manifold, and not only just through the production. For us, it is clear horticulture always improves, or that is what we think about horticulture, that improves health. And with health, of course, you are strengthening, or the people are strengthened for shocks to come. But it is more than only supplementing food with the micronutrients which the people need. Horticulture also creates wealth. Horticulture is probably the most interesting cropping system where poor people can grow out of poverty. And not only farmers, but everybody who's producing. It can be people without land, so landless people can also start producing horticulture. be it on 10 by 10 meter square field or even vertical horticulture activities. And so there is income opportunities for a lot of people. Horticulture, besides creating wealth, is also creating employment and enabling new market access, meaning throughout the whole value chain, horticulture is very labor intensive, from the production through the processing. So there is a lot of employment possibilities. Plus, whoever produces horticulture is more or less also involved in markets, meaning there are more or less no people producing horticulture just for their own consumption. It is always selling a bit on the market. So with horticultural people, you always have some kind of access to markets. And this is from both sides. You can, of course, you can say only those produce horticultural crops which are linked to markets. But you also can see it the other way around, that people growing horticulture are always finding a way to the market and then can take even the staple crops to the markets. Plus, another one, you still can see this, you can follow my speech still on this one here. Horticulture empowers women through increased income for the women, but also that they are then involved in decision-making processes regarding land in their community, in their families. And finally, also horticulture protects and improves natural resources. We know that in horticulture we have the biggest plant genetic resources conserved and used out in the field. And as we all know, horticulture, especially the legumes, are improving soil and soil structures. And finally, after disaster, horticultural crops are one of the ways of getting people started again. So all this means the blessing of horticulture of high-value crops through their production, through the flexibility in their production, and the stimulation of development, of economic development and social development. Horticulture, crops and high-value crops in general are kind of enhancing the resilience of the people producing, but also all the others in the value chain then benefiting. But it is also a curse, and the curse is exactly this high value. Because of the high value, a lot of producers are tempted to misuse inputs, mainly pesticides, but also fertilizers, then also land and water, and this leads to land degradation, and there we are then coming back to our topic here. I will just run through a few slides on horticultural production regarding pesticides misuse. There are a lot of, the pest pressure is very high in horticulture, but the pesticides application is even higher. And quite often it is very excessive, and it is used as a kind of prophylactical application of pesticides instead of using the integrated pest management approach. So you have figures out there that up to 80% of the applied pesticides are actually overused. So from 100% pesticides application, actually 20% would be enough to more or less have an economic valuable production. But still, they are putting a lot on the fields and on the horticultural crops. Plus, the pesticides used are coming from doubtful qualities, meaning sometimes they are using pesticides from cotton, sometimes they are mixing their own cocktails. So it is a very fantastic way of using different things to get rid of all these pests. And then the last, and this is very important for consumers, the normal regulated waiting period before harvest for application is quite often not observed. So this means, after all, just having one example from a study where they found out that the Thai farmers are applying for a certain cropping system 3 times as much ingredients of pesticides than the Spanish colleagues do in a more or less similar system, and even 50 times as much as the Dutch farmers do in a similar system. So there you really can see where the misuse is how big the misuse is. A reason for that is, of course, that there is no official training on pesticides for a lot of farmers. There is no information. They read, a lot of farmers are not even reading then the information available on the labels of the pesticides. A lot of them are not using the protective equipment for themselves. They throw away the pesticides containers, etc. All these things which we know are really very highly dense in horticultural production. And even a lot of farmers are not able to identify the pests and the diseases. This means quite often, pesticides are compensating for missing knowledge from the farmers. And then, of course, it's also a reason because of the weak regulations regarding pesticides procedures. And it is clear the misuse of pesticides has a manifold effects after all. We all know them. The most important one is, after all, from our session now, that it has also effects on the soil, on the topsoil, but then also, of course, on the water, which then leads to land degradation after all, and that is a resilience at risk there. The same holds true quite often for fertilizers, which are overused because they are relatively cheap to the high value of the produce after all. This is for nitrogen fertilizer, this is especially for phosphorus fertilizer with all the pollution in water and also at the soil then again. And then, of course, coming back to land and water use, in horticultural production, the positive effects of land and water through horticultural production are clear. It is a better efficient, or more an efficiency or efficient way of using water and land, using horticultural crops. It is improving the soil structure, especially through the legumes and the nitrogen fixation potential which they have. With the fruit trees, of course, the afforestation is taking place, so that is also an advantage. The negative effects are, as we said, the contamination of soil and water, besides of that, especially in peri-urban areas, that horticulture leads to more urbanization after all, attracting more people coming into the region, settling down, taking away agricultural land. What does it mean now? It is clear, if we want to enhance resilience for individuals, for communities, horticulture is a very potential way of doing it. As a kind of, in the planning phase, as a kind of preparation of shocks, but also after shocks, with these different ways of these different benefits of horticultural production. But for this, it is important that the farmers, that the people producing horticultural crops need more training, need more education on how to use that, especially in the use of inputs, but also in identifying pests, etc., etc. There is then, of course, the institutional lead, bringing together the governmental regulatory agencies with the producer, consumer organizations, development organizations, to really try to find out how to increase the awareness of this misuse in the different ways of the value chain and how to ripe off the benefits after all. And eventually, it is also important to remove inexpensive old pesticides and other inputs, which then are kind of temptation for farmers to use them because they are just there and they just don't know. Thanks very much.
Bravo.